Foster Parenting, 10 things you can and probably should do for your foster child. Hi, my name is Jenna Vallanetta. I've been a foster parent for going on 15 years. And over the past few years, I have seen some attitudes and behaviors and even bias that foster parents can have towards their foster children. And so whether you are newly getting licensed and just want some information, or whether you've been licensed for a long time, I'm going to give you 10 tips today of things that you can and probably should do for your foster child. The first tip of what you can and maybe should do for your foster child is this. It is to dress your foster children nicely. I see a lot of foster kids go out in public, and you can sometimes even tell which kids in that home are foster kids versus which ones are biological or even adopted children, simply by how they look on the outside. And I know that man looks at the outward appearance and God looks at the heart. However, clothes and the outward appearances of children can really affect how they feel. A lot of kids come into foster care just maybe feeling worthless or feeling like they've been ostracized or maybe judged. And maybe your foster kids are going to feel that way as they go to school or in society or attend activities. Letting a child wear old clothes with holes in them, or they're mismatching, or their hair unkept, or their teeth not brushed, things like that can further impact in a negative way a foster child and their own self-concept. And so the first thing that I would encourage you to do is to dress kids nice. Maybe 10 years ago, there was really no ability to do that. You would buy brand new clothes that cost a lot of money, or maybe old, grubby, hand-me-down clothes that didn't look so nice. Today, you can almost get any outfit for $10, $12, and that's brand new. And for sure, if you want to shop consignment, you can find new or at least nice looking clothes that is extremely affordable, the price of a coffee. And so I encourage you, to the best of your ability, dress your foster kids nicely. The second tip of what I would encourage you to do with your foster kids is to limit sugar and sweets and just bad junk food in general. As foster kids, a lot of times what I've seen is that people will feel sorry for them. They'll take pity on them and they'll want to give them something to make them feel better about themselves or just to see them smile. And I get that. Granted, it feels good to make a kid, especially a child who maybe was sad, to smile. However, treats and sugar and junk food isn't always the way to do that. A lot of kids that are in foster care, they come with behaviors. They may come with PTSD or oppositional defiant disorder or maybe autism. And when they come into care, giving them sugar or sweets or maybe even really any foods without asking the foster parent first, it can do damage to that child, or it can affect them long term in major ways. A lot of these kids, they get junk at school. We've had foster kids that have learned, if I behave bad, they will give me treats to make me behave good, or they will go to visits with their biological families. And I think that you would be shocked at the amount of junk that these kids can eat there. Sometimes they'll eat a pizza and a hamburger and a candy bar and cake all at the same sitting, and they're just bloated, and they come home with ADHD and they're hyper, and it affects their sleep and their moods and just their ability to assimilate back in the home. And it can be really hard for foster parents. And so I encourage foster parents to really be in tune to what maybe triggers a child. Maybe for one it's chocolate, maybe for another it's just fast food or just sugar. It just really depends on a child. We had one child that had extreme behaviors. He was probably one of the worst cases in the system in my area. And what we did was we recognized that he had an allergy to casein, which is what is in milk. And so as we eliminated that, we noticed his rages and his fits. They were almost completely gone and eliminated. And so there can be certain triggers with food, and being in tune to those and being aware of those is really important as a foster parent. As I say, the number 2 is to limit the sugar and the junk food, and that does not mean to completely eliminate anything that child might want or love to eat. I know in our house on Friday nights we try to make pizzas and get together, and the kids love to put together, homemade pizzas, or at Christmas time we bake dozens and dozens of cookies. And so I think moderation is always a good thing. Sometimes foster parents can use food as control, and they can withdraw food, and that is so dangerous to foster children who maybe they went days without eating, or they have limited food, or they have eating disorders. And so it's just really important, again, not to use these as a gospel or in any extreme, but just to be aware of the amount of sugar a foster child has. The third thing that you can and probably should do for your foster child is to treat that child with dignity and respect. Again, as a foster parent for over a dozen years, sadly, I have heard foster parents talk about their foster kids. It literally just makes me tear up, because they will refer to them in sometimes atrocious ways. They maybe name call their kids, or they make excuses and say, well, they're bad kids, and they label them in negative ways that if that child is listening, and a lot of times they can be, it can scar that child or impact them for a long, long time. So I just encourage foster parents to treat kids with dignity and respect. That includes treating their biological family with dignity and respect and their story. I see on social media people who are followed quite frequently will share the nitty and gritty of a child's story with the entire world on social media. I think if a child gives you permission and they have a say in it and they want to share part of their story, or it's necessary maybe for a learning environment for a child, for someone to know that child's story, I get that. However, sometimes a child can be used, maybe even put like on a pedestal as a bad behavior child, or a child that isn't functioning in a home. And so they'll use that child as kind of a scapegoat for that family's problems. And they will expose that child's face and their story on social media or in other venues that may long-term harm that child, depending on where that child goes in their own personal desire of what to share or what not to. Is that child's story? Is that child's biological parents? Is that child's history? So it is really important to continually and frequently and often and every single time to treat that child with dignity and respect, not only to that child, but when you're talking to other people and family and friends, and when you're sharing on social media. The fourth thing that you can and probably should do for your foster child is to listen. And I know that sounds so basic. Anyone that's in a relationship, the first thing that you learn is to listen to other people. However, when foster kids come into care, sometimes there can be really extreme behavior. Sometimes foster parents can shut down, or they can kind of stonewall a child if there's behaviors or attitudes or triggers in that child that may affect that foster parent. A foster child rarely has people that they can honestly just talk to, that are unbiased, that sit and listen without an agenda. They may have social workers, they even may have therapists, they may have their bio family, but a foster parent can be such an asset for a foster child if they will just sit down and listen. And as we listen, we don't need to have all the answers. We don't need to fix the foster child. We don't need to act like we have everything together, and we don't need to tell them what to do. We just need to be a safe place, a listening ear, because these kids, they're not our house guests. They're not visitors coming for the weekend. They're children, and when they come into your home, they should be treated justifiably as part of your family. The fifth thing that you can and probably should do for your foster child is take them to the doctor, and that includes to the therapist if needed. Foster kids, for whatever reason, I feel like sometimes they don't go to the doctor as often as they need to. A child may get sick, and maybe that foster parent is worried about allegations, or they're worried about being seen as incompetent because that child has on their paperwork or their medical records as coming into the walk-in clinic or the emergency room as being sick. However, foster kids, they need to be seen when they're not feeling good. They need to be treated just like any other child that's in your home. I've seen foster kids that maybe are squinting. They can't do their schoolwork. However, it feels like too big of a burden maybe to foster parents to take them into the ophthalmologist and get them glasses. Or I've seen that a child has maybe broken a pair of glasses. And so to teach that child a lesson, the foster parents will not go out and get that child a second pair of glasses. Kids who are foster kids, they don't want to misbehave. They don't want to be kicked out of your home. They want safety and security. However, a lot of times I think foster parents can see foster kids and assume that some of their behaviors or some of the things that they do or say are on purpose, when the reality is foster kids are just kids. They have accidents, they make mistakes, they get sick, and when they do need to see the doctor. It's common practice in our home when a child comes into care that within the first couple days, usually we take that foster child into the doctor. They get a full exam. It kind of sets up a baseline for that child about their general health. Maybe if they're behind on immunizations, that can be documented. If they come into care with bruises or injuries, that as well can be documented. And it's just really great practice to take a child into the doctor, also to take that child into the dentist. It breaks my heart seeing kids in care that have their teeth rotted out of their face, or they haven't been treated, they have a toothache, or they need braces, and the foster parent just chooses not to because of maybe a lot of children in their home, or they're too busy, or they need to drive to get that child to the doctor. However, these kids need medical care. They need therapy if needed, whether that's every week or a couple times a week. It is really important for these kids to heal, to get the medical care that they deserve. Another great reason to take these kids into the doctor is because sometimes behaviors aren't a result of trauma or maybe recent moves, but they can be a result of underlying diagnosis that have not been pinpointed, that have not been addressed. And so taking the kids to the doctor, being really open and honest with the doctor about behaviors, so that if that child needs medication, if that child needs certain therapies, if they need to be treated because they're behind or delayed in walking or in their vision or their hearing, it's so important to make sure that they get in, and that will help their overall behavior, their ability to assimilate into your home, and their overall success in the long run. The sixth thing that you can and should do for your foster child is to make sure that that child attends school. And that may seem so basic to maybe a new foster parent or just a parent in general. However, foster kids can struggle a lot of times in school. And I get that. They can wake up in the morning, they can struggle getting out the door or getting on the bus. They can be late for school. They can maybe refuse to wear a coat or don't want to put on their shoes. They may go into school screaming their heads off, and that may feel like it reflects back on the foster parent, but it really doesn't. It is just behaviors or maybe struggles with transition or socially or emotionally or academically at school. The reason these kids need to be in a school as much as possible is because a lot of times foster kids move often. They maybe move from home to home, they move school districts, they meet new friends, and then they have to lose those friends to go into a different foster home. I've known a couple of situations where the biological parents will literally keep a child away from school, away from people, because they're getting physically harmed and they don't want anyone to find out that they are being abused. And so biological parents may have kept that child out of school for years and years. And so academically, they could be so far behind. These kids really need school for a couple reasons. It's consistent. There's teachers and there's adults that they can trust and that they can bond with. They learn social skills that they can't learn if they're not in a group environment. And academically, they need to be where they are so that they can achieve graduation, college, whatever their dreams are in the future. So please get these kids to school. The seventh thing that you can and should do with your foster kids is to make sure that they attend their family visits with their biological family. That may be a mother or a father or both, or a grandparent or biological siblings. And I get it. We have experienced excruciating times where kids have gone to visits and come home and had extreme behaviors. We've experienced wetting and crying and bloody noses and rocking and stemming behaviors as a result of visits. We've had kids that literally we've had to pick up and to put in the transport car because they were raging and kicking and having fits. And that may sound awful to someone if you've never been a foster parent. However, the visits with the biological families, they are not even a result of the social workers. They are mandated by the judge. And so if that child is having problems at the visit or after the visit, make sure to document that. Maybe make sure to share that on paper through emails or through some other written form with the judge, and let them know the behaviors that are having. At the same time, it's not our position or our right to limit or to stop the visits with the biological family. Imagine a foster child that's been taken away from their biological parents. Imagine the trauma they feel, the rejection they may feel, the abuse that maybe is triggered. They may want to see their biological parents. They may want that more than anything else, but they have mixed feelings or mixed fears or agitation, or they may just struggle with transition. That does not mean that that child should not see their biological family. At the same time, that child may have siblings, and the only place a child is going to see those siblings is at a visit with their biological family, or maybe a sibling visit. I've seen foster parents who have pretended like their child is sick, or that, maybe they were sleeping, or whatever the case may be, and refuse to take a child or allow a transporter to come and pick up that child and take it to a visit. That is just not okay. We're not in charge of the case of the child. We do not see the overarching agenda of the state or of the system or the situation that the biological parents are in. So it is not our job to keep foster kids away from their biological families. Those children need to be able to cope and experience time with their biological family. And if not, talk to a social worker and make sure again to document, but do everything in your power if you can to make sure that child sees biological family, including their biological siblings. Number 8, what you can and probably should do for a foster child. Please, please, please enroll the foster child in extracurricular activities, whether that be a sports or maybe an art class or music. These kids miss out on extracurricular activities. A lot of times their lives have been narrowed down to good and bad and do's and don'ts. And it's a bunch of rules, but these kids are a wealth of dreams and hopes and gifts that are really untapped with inside them. And so I encourage you to find out what they're interested in. Just ask them and enroll them. We had one little guy, he was 5 years old, and I don't think he'd ever been in a sport or any kind of activity. And we put this little guy in football, and he was incredible. He was a natural. He was gifted. He would weave in and out of the people and make touchdown after touchdown. We wouldn't have known that. He wouldn't have known that. And at the end of this season, he got this great big trophy that he was so proud of, something that he could look on and remember that he is good and that he is kind and he is capable and he is able and he has gifts within him that are meant to be shared with others. And so please, I know it's extra cost. A lot of times the state can reimburse you if you put them in a sporting event or some other activity. Just make sure to note that, to contact the social worker, and just make it happen. Make time in your schedule, and maybe even see if there's a transporter, someone in between that can help to take your child back and forth to sporting events if you are really busy. But get those kids in activities that they love. Number 9 is to make sure that you pray with and you pray for your foster children. This is the most important thing that you could do for your foster child, especially as a person of faith. I've seen the value and the impact of prayer really be lifelong for some of the children that have been in my care. It's something that will last a lifetime. It's something that you hand over to them. And regardless if they leave your home, if they go back to biological family, whatever their future story is, you will give them the gift of prayer. And so I encourage you, teach them to pray alongside them, and most of all, pray for them. That's something you could do after a child leaves. It's something you could do when they're sleeping. It can something you can do for yourself as well, to pray, to ask, can I be a good parent to this child? Can I see this child the way that you see them, God? And to be able to ask for strengths and resources and help along the way. These children, they will be better because of your prayers. And the 10th thing that you can and you should do for your foster children is to treat them just like your biological kids. No, they won't have the same history. They won't have the same genetics. They won't have the same story or personality or gifts or characteristics. But these children individually are amazing. And they deserve to be treated just like your biological kids when they are in your home. I've seen families that so devastatingly have shown clear bias against their foster kids. Again, like I mentioned before, they may be dressed different, or they hang their heads and they look at the ground when they walk as if they're not worthy to hold their head up and to be a part of that family. I've seen even other biological siblings treat foster kids like they're dogs, or they're worthless, or they're unnecessary or unimportant or replaceable. And these kids already come with a lack of worth or identity, and a lot of times they've been beaten down and defeated. They've been told everything that's wrong with them. So when they come into your home, I encourage you, again, treat them with dignity and respect, and make sure that you treat them. Check yourself, pray, ask yourself, ask people around you, do you see me treating my kids different? Can you tell which of my kids are foster and which ones are bios? Because when you're in a public place, ideally, other people won't be able to tell. They won't know which one's a bio and which one's a foster just by looking at these kids, because they should be treated so equally and they should be loved just as much as a bio child. And these are my final thoughts. Imagine being a foster child, taken away from your home, your belongings, your neighborhood, your friends, your family, every person that you've ever known or ever loved. And you're placed in a home where you know nobody, everything is unfamiliar, everything is new. Imagine how difficult that is. If you're a foster parent, or if you're going to be a foster parent, I encourage you to make sure to see the foster child from their perspective. Everything you say, or everything that you do, or the way that you behave towards that child, imagine if you were him or her. And then make sure to treat that child with dignity and respect. If we are making a commitment to become foster parents, my guess is that we want what is best for these kids. We want to serve, we want to love, we want to care for these kids. We have hearts of compassion. So if there's anything that is making you stonewall or separate from these kids, or not give these kids the best care they deserve, I just ask you to reevaluate that. And if you're getting ready to go in to be a foster parent, think about these things ahead of time and make sure to treat that child and care for the needs the best that you possibly can. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe below. Check out the other videos below about foster care, and we will see you next time. And remember, go out, live bold, and be brave.